2025 was a turbulent and trying year for people, nature, and climate. And it looks like 2026 is off to a similar start. Welcome to Stories to Watch. My name is Dasgupta, President and CEO of World Resources Institute. Thank you for joining us. WRI is a global research organization working to improve people's lives, protect nature, and halt climate change. Every January, we bring our experts together to identify trends that will shape the next 12 months, and we highlight what to watch for. Last year, we focused on whether the world could deliver climate finance to the communities that need it most. You can see our 2025 recap on our website. Now let's look at the trends that will shape 2026. Trend 1. The transition to a more efficient, low-carbon, and nature-positive economy is well underway across the world. We are seeing big changes in global markets as climate solutions accelerate. For example, Ethiopia banned imports of all fossil fuel vehicles in 2024. Since then, electric vehicles have made up over 60% of new car sales. In Pakistan, families, farmers, and businesses have been putting solar panels on their roofs at an incredible pace. Solar panel imports over the last 6 years surpassed the country's total installed power plant capacity. In Brazil, 3.4 million hectares of land are under restoration, an area greater than all of Belgium. Land restoration is generating hundreds of thousands of jobs in lower-income rural areas and indigenous communities. And most surprisingly, even with federal efforts to discourage renewables in the United States, the S&P Global Clean Energy Transition Index rallied 44%. It dramatically beat S&P 500 and Global Oil Index. Trend 2. Climate-related disasters continue to break records in 2025. Hurricane Melissa brought the strongest tropical wind gust ever recorded. The storm claimed 45,000 lives in Jamaica. The Los Angeles wildfires were the costliest in history, destroying over 16,000 buildings. Record rainfalls up to 33 centimeters or a foot in a day caused landslides and flooding across Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and Thailand, impacting more than 1 million people. Altogether, natural disasters cost the world $220 billion in damages in 2025. Less than half of this was covered by insurance. 90% of people in low-income countries lack access to any form of insurance. While impacts are happening everywhere, vulnerable populations pay the price. Trend 3 is the most interesting. Amidst this destruction, political backlash against climate action increased in wealthier countries. These are the countries, at least theoretically, can most afford to take ambitious climate action. In parts of Europe, people took their frustration to the streets. Workers protested coal plant closures in Poland. Communities protested solar farms in the UK. And farmers protested agriculture policies in Brussels. The political backlash in the US is coming from the federal government itself, which has withdrawn the US from Paris Agreement, UNFCCC, and other global organizations. Domestically, the administration is encouraging investment in fossil fuels and dismantling existing regulations, climate research, and data. In addition, there was a dramatic decrease in overseas development aid in 2025. US aid was abruptly dismantled, and governments in UK, Germany, and France cut international aid while boosting defense spending. This has cascading impacts, for climate action in many emerging economies. Meanwhile, many other countries, from Vietnam to Indonesia, South Africa to Colombia, are embracing climate action as an economic development strategy. At least half of new car sales were electric in China, Norway, and Ethiopia last year. India attracted record foreign investment in its renewable energy sector. In the last 4 years, it increased from 1% to 8% of total foreign investment. Globally, we are in the middle of a transition from a 250-year-old economy built on fossil fuels to a more efficient, clean, and resilient economy. But we saw two opposing narratives emerge about the transition last year. On one hand, people argue that this transition will slow down economic growth, increase price of basic goods, and disrupt many jobs. On the other hand, many say that the transition will unlock a new level of economic prosperity, ensure affordable energy and goods, and create many jobs. How is it possible that there are two completely opposite narratives about the same transition? Is it because citizens across countries have different priorities? Or because countries have varying levels of fossil fuel reserves? Or is it simply an ideological difference? Most importantly, can both narratives be true at the same time? It turns out both perspectives are underpinned by three common concerns: economic growth, affordability, and jobs. We will examine each in the following stories, explore what the evidence shows, and hear from people on the ground. In 2026, the question is no longer if the transition will happen, but how it will happen, who pays, who benefits, and who gets left behind. For most people in the world, the economy is the number one concern. Some leaders fear that the transition will make them less competitive in the global markets and slow down economic growth. These concerns have real consequences. In December 2025, the European Commission watered down its landmark plan to ban petrol and diesel car production by 2035. The German and Italian governments claim there are too many hurdles to meet that goal, including low consumer demand, limited electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and fierce competition from Chinese manufacturers, even with tariffs in place. They argue that an aggressive transition would harm the auto industry, which contributes to 5% of Germany's GDP. Yet, others argue that delaying the transition risks forfeiting Europe's long-term competitiveness and growth. Meanwhile, in the US, the federal government is betting on oil and gas to fuel its growth, deliberately slowing down investments in clean energy and EVs by eliminating incentives. How this transition will impact economic growth is a very important question. Experts have been collecting evidence from across the globe, and our understanding is becoming better as new industries take hold. Let's look more closely at the EV market compared to internal combustion vehicles. Traditional vehicle sales peaked in 2017, have been going down ever since. Meanwhile, global EV uptake is happening even faster than experts predicted. The latest forecasts expect electric vehicles to overtake traditional vehicle sales within the next 10 years. It seems the faster automotive companies and countries make the switch, the bigger slice of the future markets they can get. The data shows this is true for the overall economy too. Leading experts say the transition can help economies grow faster than business as usual. By investing in clean energy and resilient food systems, we could produce up to $20 trillion in additional economic benefits per year by 2017. It's not just about money. Inclusive growth could reduce poverty and avoid over 9 million premature deaths by 2050. The transition will improve air and water quality and human health, particularly for low-income and vulnerable communities. To reap these benefits, it's a race to the top. For over a decade, China has been fully embracing the transition as a driver for economic growth. In 2024, China invested twice as much in energy transition compared to any other economy. And as a top producer of wind, solar, batteries, and EVs, they're poised to dominate the global market for technologies for the new economy. Every country in the world will eventually transition. And the approach they choose will have significant impacts on people's lives. Let's go to George Mwaniki in Kenya to see how these choices play out on the ground.
In the city of Nairobi, riding two- and three-wheelers, which are commonly known as boda and tuk-tuks, might be the easiest way to get around traffic. Cheaper than cars, they make about 70% of newly registered vehicles in Kenya. Every year, millions rely on them to taxi to the market or transport goods, powering small businesses and driving the economy. But even the cheapest ride can be costly. Many motorcycle taxi drivers spend nearly half of their daily earnings on fuel. But what if two or three-wheelers went electric? Kenya is uniquely positioned for this shift. At night, thousands of megawatts generated by wind, geothermal, and hydropower go unused. A driver that spends around 700 Kenya shillings of fuel per day can spend only 200 Kenya shillings on electricity overnight. That is more money in people's pockets and in the local economy. Electrifying transport also reduces reliance on imported fuel, which half of the imported fuel is spent by the small and three-wheeler sector. Is it easy? Electric two- and three-wheelers still cost 20 to 60% more than the petrol models. While they still save money in the long term, most drivers lack access to affordable loans, leaving them exposed to informal lenders who charge up to 50% interest rates. To address this, the government is partnering with civil society to systematically bring these electric two- and three-wheelers to people who can benefit from them. Initiatives include tailored financing for riders in remote areas, which facilitates local transport and connects people to services. There are also new programs to attract financing for charging stations and training programs to teach local mechanics how to fix electric bikes. Additional interventions include raising public awareness of the economic, environmental, and health benefits of electric vehicles, particularly improved air quality, a major challenge for Nairobi. This approach strengthens the informal economy and supports vulnerable communities first, building trust that the transition can benefit people. As adoption grows, costs will fall, demand will rise, and the market can scale. The choices countries make around developments is a key story to watch now in 2026.
That was George in Nairobi. When most countries look to electrify transportation, they focus on cars. Kenya is making a deliberate choice to electrify two- and three-wheelers, not just to grow, but to support the economy from the bottom up. This approach is also necessary in rich countries like Denmark, which produces 3 times more food than it consumes, exporting the rest. The country is building its competitive advantage in sustainable agriculture. The government is paying farmers to reduce nitrogen pollution, encouraging more efficient livestock production, and working to become a world leader in plant-based food and green proteins. Businesses also have the same choices about how to grow. IKEA, the largest furniture retailer in the world, discovered that decarbonizing can be profitable. Since 2016, it has increased revenue by nearly 24%, while reducing its climate footprint by 30%. So what should we watch for? There is evidence from Kenya to Denmark to China that it is possible to deliberately grow and decarbonize at the same time, even today. African leaders like Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed have championed green policies and investment as the growth opportunity for the next decade. Ethiopia will showcase its progress as host of COP32 in 2027. Will more countries set growth pathways that deliver for people, nature, and climate? Countries not only need a plan, but also a practical way to finance it. For emerging economies, this is a significant challenge. The transition will need all kinds of finance: domestic, international, public, private. Country platforms are a way to bring all these different sources together, along with specific investment plans. For example, Brazil's country platform aims to attract at least $10 billion by 2030. By September last year, they had already raised $4.5 billion for forest restoration and bioeconomy projects. Last November at COP30, we saw the establishment of 13 new country platforms, including Rwanda, India, and South Africa. Will more countries commit to aligning finance behind their transition priorities? The world's most electrified steel mill is under construction in Sweden, aiming to produce green steel at the same cost as traditional steel. The project has secured over $7 billion in financing from government and investors who aim to disrupt a massive market. Across the US, car makers like GM and Ford are backing off from billion-dollar investment in EV factories. Meanwhile, Hyundai, Rivian, and Tesla are moving forward. Will we see major investments in clean industrialization across the world? An economic transition needs vast innovation and entrepreneurship in every sector. Countries like Kenya, Vietnam, and Indonesia that aim to become high-income economies by 2045 have also set strong climate targets. They are investing in local innovation to reach their goals. Vietnam recently established government-backed venture capital funds nationally and in Hanoi City. In Indonesia, a public-private partnership helped the startup WasteX get off the ground. The company turns crop waste into biochar that boosts soil health and reduces the need for fertilizer. Some initial trials saw the 29% greater yields and raised farmer income by 47%. How will countries nurture local green innovation? Choices exist for countries and companies to ensure the transition can unlock economic growth and bring countless benefits to people even today. One big concern is how the transition will impact the affordability of everyday goods like food, energy bills, and transport. For the past few years, cost of living has noticeably increased across the world. From the state of New York to countries like Nigeria and Senegal, leaders are citing affordability as a reason to continue investing in fossil fuels. Even when sustainable options like renewables are cheaper and more reliable in the long run, they may have upfront costs that are sometimes difficult to manage today. When we talk about affordability, energy is often at the center of the discussion. But it is relatively a small percentage of families' expense. It is usually considered part of the housing. Housing itself is often the largest household expense. Housing is arguably the biggest affordability crisis, though it looks different across the world. If you look at the map behind me, in low-income countries, many poor people end up living in informal housing, represented by the darker shaded areas. 2.8 billion people, 1 in 3 people living globally, live in substandard housing. Many of these individuals are part of the informal economy, and their homes are also their workplaces. In richer countries with stricter housing laws, informal housing is often not the problem. It is high housing costs and significant homelessness. In richer countries, housing prices are increasing far faster than people's wages. We don't usually connect housing to climate, but buildings account for 40% of global emission. In China, buildings account for 48% of energy-related emissions, half in building materials, half in heating and cooling. Housing is not just a matter of emissions. Climate impacts like floods, fires, and storms significantly affect families depending on the location and the condition of their homes. For example, climate risk is driving insurance prices up, even in the richest country in the world. 15 to 20% of homeowners in hurricane-prone Florida forego insurance. Globally, climate change threatens housing that is already inadequate and unaffordable for many people. Let's talk to Enrique Evers in Brazil, where they're taking a systematic approach to closing the gap.
Hello from Porto Alegre, Brazil. 2 years ago, the place where I'm standing was completely submerged. Devastating floods affected more than 2 million people in this part of the country and forced 80,000 into shelters. Today, as the region strives to build back better, the lingering gap of secure housing has been highlighted as a key issue. When people can't afford to live in formal, urbanized areas, they are pushed far from city services or into risk-prone areas like this one. This means long commutes, lower access to jobs, and greater exposure to threats. People without decent housing are the most vulnerable to climate change. Across Brazil, more than 16 million people live in favelas and comunidades, which are often informal settlements without land tenure or essential services. This isn't new, but climate change is making it worse. In Brazil, the federal government launched Periferia Viva, a program supporting cities and states to invest in and upgrade more than 50 vulnerable neighborhoods. The program is based on the principle of building with the communities, co-creating solutions and connecting public policies and investments to everyday life. Local offices and guidelines enable local participation and consistency nationwide to help neighborhoods address the most pressing challenges to them. This approach has shown success in the past. In social housing communities in Recife and Teresina, in northeastern Brazil, urban coalitions brought together the city hall, civil society, and residents to co-create greener neighborhoods, as well as leisure and work opportunities. Periferia Viva seeks to scale up this type of participatory planning. Through this program, Brazil is aligning efforts to fight poverty with an integrated approach to resilient housing, urban services, social inclusion, and climate justice. The government has created an innovative network connecting cities and communities to share knowledge and solutions and accelerate change across Brazil. In every part of the world, governments need to ensure everyone has access to decent and climate-resilient housing in neighborhoods that offer services and jobs. Here in Brazil, the solution isn't building new homes somewhere else. It is upgrading the place where people already live with direct and active contributions from the community. As climate impacts intensify, ensuring access to resilient housing services and jobs is more critical than ever. Brazil is showing how national governments, cities, and communities can move faster towards that goal, starting now. That's why housing is at the center of affordability, one of WRI's stories to watch for 2026.
That was Enrique in Porto Alegre. Brazil is not just building higher quality, more affordable housing, but doing it in a participatory way that makes neighborhoods more livable, keeps costs down, and increases climate resilience. UN Habitat says the world needs to build 96,000 affordable homes a day by 2030 to house everyone. The way we build not only matters immensely for people and climate in places like Porto Alegre, but also in Washington, D.C., where I live. Housing in D.C. is expensive, but prices haven't climbed as sharply as cities like New York or Boston. One possible reason is an increase of supply of residential units. Since the new metro station opened in 2004, the Noma neighborhood near our office has undergone a remarkable transformation. From an industrial zone of warehouses and vacant factories to thousands of residential units, bustling restaurants, offices, and grocery stores. By building dense neighborhoods near public transport, residents spend less money commuting and emit less carbon. In the US, transport is often the second highest household expense after housing. Globally, it is 15% of emissions. Addressing affordability requires looking at the entire system of costs. So, what should we watch for? It may be more costly upfront to build energy-efficient and climate-resilient housing, but it helps families and governments save money in the long run. This May, the global housing crisis will be the focus of the World Urban Forum in Baku, one of the largest gatherings of urban leaders. Will housing, one of our biggest affordability problems, also be understood as a climate challenge? Let's talk about energy now. Across Africa, 600 million people still lack dependable access to electricity, despite abundant solar potential. As you can see behind me, solar prices have dropped exponentially in the last decade, and adoption is reaching tipping points in countries like Pakistan and South Africa, where it is an alternative to grid electricity. Houses and local businesses are now choosing renewables because they're cheaper, not necessarily because of government intervention. As prices continue to drop, will cheap renewable reach a tipping point in more countries? Energy demand is rising across the world, thanks to trends like increasing electrification, cooling, and economic growth. In South Asia, hotter temperature and higher incomes are expected to increase the number of air conditioner units from 40 million in 2017 to 300 million in 2040, half of it in Indonesia. Growing energy demand in some countries is already impacting electricity bills. In the US, household electricity prices have already increased faster than the inflation in the last several years. And the rapid expansion of AI and data center is expected to put increasing pressure on the electricity system and prices. How will countries meet rising energy demand affordably? And how much will it be from renewables and other low-carbon sources? Trade was a hot topic in 2025 and will likely continue to be an important focus as US trade policies create uncertainty. Last year, countries agreed to discuss trade at the UN climate negotiation for the first time. On January 1st, the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, went into effect. Some see this as encouraging more sustainable practices and low-carbon technologies. Others see this as unfair and unilateral trade restrictions. How will CBAM impact economies that are major exporters to Europe, like China and Turkey? Will new trade rules encourage or stifle green growth? Addressing the affordability and climate crises at the same time is not only possible, but a deliberate choice that can drastically improve people's lives around the world. The deepest concern in any economic transition is jobs. This is true whether you're in the US, where the unemployment rate is 4.6%, or in South Africa, where it is as high as 32%. Few things are scarier than losing a job. It is not just the loss of income. It is a threat to our sense of identity and our family's future. The classic example is coal mining. Among fossil fuels, coal is the most polluting and least efficient. Hence, one of the first things countries have been transitioning away from. In the US state of West Virginia, coal mining jobs peaked at 127,000 in 1950 and have dwindled to 14,000 remaining jobs. Worldwide, around 8.4 million people work in coal. This is about 10% of the 76 million workers in the energy sector overall. Energy is an important sector in this transition, but jobs will also change across other sectors. For example, today 1.3 billion people work in agriculture. What will the overall impact be on jobs across the economy? An exhaustive study was just published on this topic. The overarching message from the report is that the transition will impact jobs differently across sectors and regions. Hence, it is useful to be specific when discussing job losses and gains. First, indeed, there will be job losses in the energy sector, but even more in manufacturing and agriculture as countries move away from primary materials and adopt sustainable farming practices and intensify production and reduce labor needs. Second, at the same time, there will be significant job gains. In agriculture and construction, many of these new jobs respond to investment adaptation. The models show there will be likely more new jobs gained than lost in all sectors except manufacturing. While there are a range of estimates, overall, this transition will create around 375 million net new jobs just in the next decade. But the most interesting number is not how many jobs are gained, but the churn. How many jobs will change? The percentage of job churn varies across sectors and will also vary across geographies and demographics. Overall, approximately 630 million jobs are expected to change in the transition. This is roughly 18% of the overall workforce. This makes investing in workforce development and reskilling critical to the transition. Let's go to Ashwini Hingne in India to see this in action.
I'm standing in an automotive factory in Mumbai that supplies car components to some of the largest vehicle manufacturers in India, Europe and North America. In fact, 80% of car components in India are manufactured in small enterprises like this one. India's national government has set an ambitious target for 30% of all private cars that are sold to be electric by 2030. It is also investing to grow its electric vehicle manufacturing ecosystem. Studies indicate that 1 in 3 traditional automotive jobs will be affected. 14% of jobs could be at risk of becoming obsolete, while 17% will require significant reskilling. While some jobs will disappear, the EV transition will create new opportunities in the automotive workforce. But these jobs will require higher order skills, and most businesses are unprepared. Most workers require 3 to 5 days of informal, on-the-job training and hesitate to attend formal trainings as it costs a day's wage. For small businesses, the challenge is compounded. They need a skilled workforce to remain competitive, but operating on thin margins makes investing in reskilling risky. Current skilling programs are insufficient to meet the scale and urgency of the transition and often leave out reskilling of the workforce. So what does it take to make reskilling accessible, effective and scalable for workers and small businesses? We are learning that short, hands-on trainings delivered in regional languages are critical to ensure effective reskilling, for example, in the Chennai-Coimbatore industrial belt. We are also seeing that technical institutes like Indian Institute of Technology are offering courses in electric mobility, and sector skill councils such as the Automotive Skills Development Council are updating curricula to address skilling gaps. In the states of Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, industry associations, technical experts, supply chain partners and governments are collaborating to strengthen the skilling ecosystem and creating a pool of trained trainers. EV policies in these states go beyond technology and provide incentives for workforce preparation. What is most exciting is that the EV transition is opening up new opportunities for women to enter manufacturing, a space long dominated by men, especially in India. One such example is that of Pechi Amals, who moved from a housekeeping role to a skilled one, where she is now assembling magnets for electric vehicle motors. With businesses like this one investing in her training and supporting her at the workplace, she not only gains skills but also confidence and financial independence. Her story reflects how efforts to create inclusive spaces with training, safety, transport, flexible shifts and clear pathways for growth can increase women's participation. This is a small but significant start, but a lot needs to be done by governments and businesses. If done right, investing in skilling across value chains, particularly reskilling existing workforce, can strengthen livelihoods and expand opportunities for women and vulnerable communities. This is why Skills for Jobs is a story to watch in 2026.
That was Ashwini in Mumbai. As we saw in India, people need to be the center of this transition. Policies that accelerate this transition have too long focused on technology, infrastructure, and carbon. It needs to focus on people. The more successfully we center people, the faster we will implement the transition with more political support. Look at the Ruhr Valley region in Germany, where nearly 500,000 people worked in coal mining and steel production in 1955. But production dropped sharply over the following decades until the last 2 mines were closed in 2018. Today, the Ruhr Valley region has been transformed from manufacturing coal mining machinery to becoming one of the world's leading producers of wind turbines. The government's decentralized inclusive strategy helped support workers and kept the region thriving. So what should we watch for? Businesses need a highly skilled workforce to grow. Yet, LinkedIn data shows that the demand for sustainability-related skills is growing almost twice as fast as the supply of qualified workers. We need more efforts to address this. For example, Microsoft has successfully trained over 23 million people across 200 countries and territories through online courses. The private sector can show leadership in a workforce transition by partnering with governments, unions, and training providers to invest in reskilling. Will companies hardwire skills and training into corporate transition plans? Out of all the countries that submitted updated climate plans last year, only half explicitly named investment in people in their climate plans. And only 1% of them have concrete plans for financing workforce strategies. This is a critical gap to fill as early as possible. Just a 14% shortfall in the number of renewable energy workers needed by 2030 could lead to an additional 0.7 degrees Celsius of temperature rise. At the same time, governments must take deliberate action to ensure people who are low income and highly vulnerable have access to these new jobs. Today, the handling of workforce and skill challenges is often spread out across various ministries, from labor to education and finance to environment. At the same time, jobs are very place-based and require the coordination between local, state, and federal governments. Will governments at all scales start planning and investing more intentionally in workforce development? In 2025, AI has been all over the news for its potential impact on jobs. This is happening at the same time countries are transitioning to a new economy. AI presents both an enormous potential for climate and nature and a significant risk. We used AI to create a global data set of tree heights at 1 meter resolution, which has the potential to underpin transparent carbon markets and transform the restoration economy. Where else might AI have a groundbreaking impact? At the same time, experts anticipate broad productivity gains in the overall economy from AI, but also many potential job disruptions. However, jobs in construction and agriculture, sectors with the biggest gains in the low-carbon transition, are less likely to be impacted by AI. How will AI impact jobs for the new economy in 2026? Ultimately, the transition will only succeed if we put jobs and the skills people need for them at the center. We are not talking about distant climate or biodiversity targets for 2050 or 2100. We are focusing on what is happening right now to families around the world. Just like all of us, they're focused on how they will make a living, how they will pay their bills, and whether they feel secure and optimistic about the future. Growth, affordability, and jobs are some of the most common concerns. At WRI, we welcome this focus on everyday economic concerns. Evidence from across the world shows that this economic transition will not happen at the speed and scale necessary if people are not at the center. Though the transition is inevitable, it will not be automatically good or bad for growth, affordability, or jobs. That will depend on choices we make and if we are intentional about ensuring they're good for people. We are seeing the emergence of tipping points in some sectors as the economics of the transition become more attractive than ever. As each of the stories illustrate, policies and solutions that are good for everyday economic concerns exist now, not just in the distant future. This is true in rich countries as well as in emerging economies. The Danish government chose new agricultural policies. Businesses and families chose to put solar panels on their roofs in Pakistan and South Africa. Kenya chose to electrify two-wheelers and three-wheelers first. And IKEA chose to decarbonize while becoming more resource efficient. They made these choices because they're good for people and their bottom line. They also happen to be good for the planet. Transitions are always difficult. Changing a 250-year-old economy is an enormous task. But choices exist today for governments, businesses, and communities to make the transition good for people and the planet at the same time. These choices also exist for each one of us. Choose wisely.